Thank you for that lovely introduction. As Ali said, I was a litigation lawyer for more than 30 years. And as you can imagine, that's a profession rife with anxiety. People have anxious thoughts, anxious dreams. People need to go to the loo just before they're due to speak to a group of people. And I was no exception to that. I would have anxious dreams, and I had one in particular, which was a recurring dream. So in this dream, I've got a very important mission. It's unclear quite what it is. It's something about maybe saving the orphanage or saving the old people's home or something like that. But I know that the judge that I'm going to get is just this very difficult guy called Sheriff Redface. And because I know he's going to be so difficult, and he's very hostile to children and old people and living and dying and everybody, I just prepare my argument meticulously. It's quite unusual for me. I often wing it, but this time I prepare my argument meticulously, and I write down all my arguments really, really carefully in this large purple folder. And then I'm suddenly in the court, and the clerk says, "All rise," and we all stand up. And Sheriff Redface comes in, and the sheriff sort of looks at me and says, "On you go." And everybody's there, they're waiting for me to speak, and I open this folder, and I find that some malicious person's transcribed the whole text into Esperanto. And I'm completely frozen. So the judge is looking at me. I don't know what to do. He's getting kind of more and more angry looking and red-faced. And gradually the room darkens, gets more and more dark. And I realize that somehow I've been transported to the Carnegie Hall. And in fact, I'm standing on the stage of the Carnegie Hall. And I hear in the distance, as if in a dream, the opening chords of the song, "The Greatest Love of All." And I'm aware that this microphone is just kind of looming towards me. And I realize that I have to sing. But I don't know the words to "The Greatest Love of All," but I have to sing. So I try. I believe the future is the future. Take the past and leave it all behind. Give more Labradors to the blind. Try not to be unkind. Make it easier. Let the children laugh. Have an early bath to remind you how. And I stop at that point because there's a strange whooshing noise that comes initially from my left, and then I notice it's actually coming all over this auditorium. And I realize it's not a whooshing noise. It's actually booing. The whole audience is booing. Thousands and thousands of people. And I'm rooted to the spot. And in the middle of the front row is Sheriff Redface. And he holds up this noose. I wake up. So that's my performance anxiety. But my guess is what the phrase conjures up for you is sexual performance. What form would that take? Well, you can't have an orgasm, or you can't have the right kind of orgasm, or your partner can't, or it's too soon, or it takes too long, and it's rubbish anyway, and worse than it used to be, and nothing like your friend Sandra, or anyone else, and you didn't orgasm simultaneously, like they do in Pretty Woman. But why do we think of sex in terms of performance at all? why do we have to follow a script of how sex ought to be and what we ought to want? And how can it be different? Can it be different? Well, that's really where a sex coach comes in. But what you need to understand is that sex coaching isn't about sex. It's about what gets in the way of sex. Because from my perspective, what sexuality is really about is our happiness and our dignity as a human being, and our deep desire to live a life that means something, to live a life which is authentic and which is connected. So if we want to step off this stage of performance anxiety, we want to get out of this labyrinth of oughts, out into the sweet air and the open ground and so on, I say that there's 4 key things, and they're sequential. The first thing is embodiment. And embodiment's the first thing because we cannot overcome the tyranny of what we ought to feel until we can feel what we actually feel in a relaxed and a receptive way. And that's why sex coaches will work with the client's body, directly and indirectly, helping them to slow down, to breathe more, to pay attention to their feelings and sensations, to loosen habitual patterns of tension, to do something about dissociation, in short, to re-embody the client. And related to that, a sex coach will help the client experience the full range of their erotic potential. First, through relaxing the body and focusing on actual experience, it becomes much easier to feel a fuller range of pleasure. What isn't understood so well, I think, is that people habitually are in such a state of tension, they don't actually realize it. And what they want to do is jump from the boat of unpleasant tension to the boat of sexually charged tension and then release, but without any awareness of this kind of vast, beautiful, warm ocean of relaxed, open pleasure, which underlies everything. We can also enable the client to explore different modalities of sexuality, play, kink, tantric ritual, trance. And for a lot of people, sometimes just to be able to talk about these things without shame can be transformative. So that's the start point, embodiment. The second thing is to change our focus. So we change our focus from orgasm, the right kind of orgasm, obviously, to something more feeling and more relational. And I think this is particularly urgent now, given the pervasive pornification of our children's world. So contemporary sexologist Marty Klein wrote about the value of sex other than orgasm, saying it included touching, which most people undervalue in sex, being known and knowing someone, feeling connected, and a sense of immediacy that something is happening right now that is unique to you. Now, for me that's true. So when I ask myself, what images do I retain in my memory? It's not images of having great sex with people. And even when I thought of like my most sexual relationship, the memory that I held, and which I hold now, isn't to do with sex. I'm just lying in bed, she's sitting up in bed next to me, and she's taking off her makeup. And I'm just there with my head, I'm looking at her, and she's got quite a nice upholstered back, and I just feel really content and happy and loved. And if I scour my memory, it will always be those kind of things which I will remember. There's a wonderful contemporary Czech, I think, visionary writer called Romana Ananova. And what she says is that the most sexually damaged people are those who believe sex ought to be a pleasurable experience. It's not. It's an emotional one, and emotions of a whole range. That's the second thread. The third thread is that we need to do something about our communication, and that's what Ali was talking about with the work of the great Betty Martin that a number of us here have worked with. Because the thing about communication is often, in sex at least, it's terrible, it's mush. So often one person, uninvited, is doing something to another person, which they imagine is for that other person, without checking it at all. And that other person feels obliged to pretend to like it. Nobody says what they want, and it's a horrible, tragic souffle that just kind of collapses into the grateful hands of the legal profession, my profession. Now, that's a thing which we can change, because what Betty Martin's pioneering work is concerned about is forcing us to ask the question, who is this for? To be specific, to be clear, who is this for? So if I do something for you, which you've not asked for, it's not giving, it's taking, whatever your intention might be. But if you consent to it, and an act of enthusiastic, in-the-moment consent, not like a grudging consent that is just going to be gradually withdrawn over the year, but an enthusiastic, in-the-moment consent, it's for me. You don't have to be grateful. You don't have to say how wonderful I am. You don't have to give me top marks. You don't need to go ooh and ah and ah. You can just feel what you feel. Isn't that fantastic? Just feel what you feel. And if I ask you to do something to me, and you consent again in the same enthusiastic, in-the-moment way, it's for me. You're not responsible for my pleasure. I don't expect you to be telepathic. If it's not fitting, it's my responsibility to tell you, to change it. The Wheel of Consent is wonderful work. The practitioners in this country will do lots and lots of workshops. I'll do more myself, but that's all I want to say about that at the moment. But you can see how a way of making clear who is this for, and changing the idea of consent from something like letting the army in the castle and then they can just do whatever they like, to something that's enthusiastic and in the moment. You can see how that can revolutionize couples' relationships who need it, who are sadly let down by these kind of sensate focus things that couples are habitually fobbed off with, like pathetic candlelit baths, which disgruntled couples are more likely to use as a murder device than an amorous one. So that's three. And you can see how they build on each other. The last of my four keys is more controversial. I believe that we've got to change the way that we think and the way that we talk about the body. We think of it as a something, as something that we own, rather than who we are. So we're still within a tradition set up by those bachelors, Descartes and Newton, 300 or so years ago, that thinks of the body as a machine which can function well or badly, which can be broken, and which can maybe be fixed. And I'm trying, and other people are trying, to change that language. So sometimes I say to my clients, it would be better to see our body as being like a vast soul, or like a vast heart, containing memory, emotion, experience, feeling, expression, everything, inexhaustible. I became a sex coach because of my vows as a Buddhist. Buddhists are supposed to alleviate suffering. And they believe that the world is inherently suffering or unsatisfying in the modern language. And it's true. There's a lot of suffering that we can do very little about. We get old, we get ill, we die. Everyone we know dies. But we can do something about sexual unhappiness. We can, instead of thinking of performance, think of our sexuality as the door to an alive and vivid world. And those that love us hold that door open. Them for us for them. And that is the greatest love of all. Thank you.